Hello, lovers. Welcome to Heart, the Living Spiritfully podcast. I am your host, Paul Galoro, and in this podcast, I have heart-centered conversations with people I believe are truly living spiritfully. This is our finale of the very first season of Heart to Heart. And before we get into it, I just want to thank you all so much for joining me on this journey. I started back in June 2020. It is now December, and the world has changed quite a bit in that time. And through my experiences with all of our guests, all 12 hearts that I had a chance to connect with, I feel as though I have changed as well. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. Now, to celebrate season 1, I'd like to do something special and have a live heart-to-heart conversation with all of you. And we're going to do that in the Living Spiritfully Collective Facebook group. So make sure that you check the link in the show's notes. Make sure you scroll all the way down, click on the link for the Facebook group, answer the questions, and then join me on Wednesday, December 16th for a very special live recording of Heart to Heart, where I'll be the special guest and I'll be answering all of your questions. So I do hope you will join me. Today's guest is Derek Antonio. Now, this is the first time Derek and I ever had a heart-to-heart conversation like this. Derek is the owner of Pop Music, the record shop that I frequent in Toronto. And I chose Derek as my final guest for this season because I really admire Derek and what he's doing. For those of you that don't know, Derek owns Pop Music, and Pop Music is a record shop that sells exclusively new vinyl. Now, they have some other merchandise like stuff to care for your vinyl, etc., and t-shirts and all of those things. But unlike all the other record stores in the city, Derek doesn't sell any vintage vinyl, and this is almost unheard of. Not a lot of people have been able to be successful in a venture like this, and Derek has been around for over 3 years, I believe. I only met him this summer through social media, and his shop I only met this summer through social media. But it's really amazing, and conversing with Derek, he shares a lot of his insights about his experience as a business owner and why he chose to call it Pop Music. I love how he says that, everyone shits on pop music, so he thought, why not call the store that? To me, I don't think he takes himself very seriously, although he takes his heart and his mission very seriously. So Derek shares a lot of his insights as an entrepreneur, as someone who is following his heart, and I truly believe that Derek is forging a path that someday many people will be walking down. So enough about that. Please enjoy my heart-to-heart conversation with Derek Antonio. So I'm so excited to have today's guest, Derek Antonio. Thank you so much for joining me today on Heart to Heart.
Thanks for having me.
But I'm super excited to see where this conversation goes for so many reasons.
Okay.
For those of you that are not familiar with you yet, you're the owner of Pop Music, the record store that I love in Toronto, that I come to at least once a month. So I'm super excited. I love everything that you're doing in the store, and I just love everything music. To me, music is super healing. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you. And I'm not going to lie, I was creeping you on your social. And so you have like a history. You've been working in music stores for years, and I listened to another podcast that you're on, and you talked about, how much you loved music as a child. So I'm super excited to just dive into this conversation and see where it takes us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me, Derek, we're just going to jump right into it. How is your heart?
My heart is full. Honestly, I feel this year in particular has been such a learning curve on so many levels. Not only as a business owner, but also as just a free spirit trying to figure out this path in life. And I think that I've been incredibly fortunate this year to have this dream of mine continue to flourish. And in many ways, we're one and the same, because so much of my energy and time is dedicated to the business. And so, um, yeah, I feel very. Again, going into what is going to be another crazy 8 weeks of holidays is going to be. It's fun. I'm really excited. Actually, I honestly wish I could almost pause time just so I could absorb more of it. So.
That's amazing. As I mentioned to you before we hit record, what I love about your shop is just this sense of like inclusivity and community that I feel when I walk in there.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, so fun fact, when I was growing up in high school, there was a Sunrise record by my mall. Oh, I shouldn't be naming names, but whatever. There was a Sunrise Records that I would go to all the time. There was one by the school that I went to, the high school that I went to, and then there was another one in the mall near where I lived. And anytime I went in there, because I was this like little gay boy that wasn't out yet, that was listening to all the like Canadian dance artists like Capital Sound and MJ. I don't know if you remember any of these compilations, like what was it, DJ Club List and DJ Line.
I remember more like the groove stations and the pirate radios and those those mixtapes.
Yeah, so it was sort of like in the same sort of field, but it was all that like dance Euro, like Tony Monaco, that kind of vibe. Yeah, exactly. Loved that because I grew up with dance music. My sisters, older than me, they sort of influenced me going down that direction. Anyways, long story, I would go into Sunrise Records, I would buy a new Gino Beat CD every week, and I just always felt like I wasn't cool. You know what I mean? The people in the shop always made me feel like, oh, that music is not cool. But when I come into your shop, like, I remember I was looking at Lisa Stansfield, and you're like, oh, you should check out the Soul to Soul compilation. It's amazing. And I'm like, I love Soul to Soul. It's like I have many different tastes, but you like welcome them all, and I love that.
Well, I think that what you just said about being feeling welcome was a really important part of the brand, and even in Toronto, to be honest with you, there isn't a great reputation for Toronto record stores beyond the fact that you're kind of like you're on your own. You go to these spaces and you're on your own, and so. Even when I was doing that business plan for pop music, I actually was a bit surprised just how unfriendly so many of the stores were. And I kind of just took for granted that this is what we're going to do. And I didn't really think that people would necessarily notice, but I'm glad that obviously it's resonated with the fans. And people are coming to the shop and a bit surprised by, being acknowledged and being kind of informed about what's kind of going on, because I mean we live in the music industry, the release schedules on steroids all the time, and so it is very intimidating for anyone coming in who doesn't necessarily know what's going on to feel comfortable and also to find their tribe. Like I do. I mean, we're a small space, but which makes it incredibly intimate. Which could be seen as a negative thing because people maybe don't want that kind of attention, but. We've somehow made it into a positive thing, and we still, obviously have fans come in who kind of mind our business and do their own thing, but there really is such an engagement level that exists and the conversation that happens because we do talk to people who come into the store, which again is a really basic retail 101, thing. But I think with record stores, for whatever reason, there's this culture that exists that isn't about that, and it's been interesting to kind of break down some of those barriers. You see someone come in and they have they're very much like thinking we're the first time in, and they're coming in and they don't really know what to think of the space. It's not a huge space, obviously, and we don't have used records, which people are always looking for. And so anyway, it's just interesting that when people come in, how do you get them to open up and how do you get them to trust? And I'm glad that obviously we've resonated with you, but also with with Toronto being such a multicultural, diverse city, trying to really be and show off as much inclusion as we can. So,
well, you're doing an amazing job. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm curious, how did you get into, working in music stores, and then what inspired you to open up your own shop? Like, I know vinyl is making a huge boom right now, but
Yeah.
for a period of time, it was like everyone was moving to the streaming services, and so
Hmm.
to open up a record store with like physical music.
Of course.
Yeah, tell me about that a little bit. What's the inspiration? How did you get there?
Well, I kind of always wanted. I remember I'm from a small town, Vernon, BC, which is the Okanagan. And so my first memories of really applying for a job, to be honest with you, was this place called C.D. McGee's, and they would never hire me, and for good reason. But I mean, I would apply to that place every year, and I was of age, like I was probably 15, 14, 15, 16, whatever, every year. I'd get a little older. And I just was inspired by the business side of it. To me, it was, I mean, just the idea of what's popular, what's trending, what's interesting. So it was very much a commercial, a commercialized point of view. Not because I was looking to sell music, but just because I was just so interested in top 40 radio and countdowns and charts and, Billboard, that kind of thing. So with CD McGee's, it was family owned. And again, I was in there asking for and doing special orders for like Madonna, maxi singles. And I was buying a lot of cassette singles from various artists. I'd buy a lot of like compilations that were coming out, Polytel and Quality Records and things, but always still produce some good comps. And then of course I'd buy actual albums too. But I don't know. I just was always just kind of enthralled by the idea of music, and then the retail side of my life started when I was 19, and I was working with Eddie Bauer, actually, in Calgary. That kind of got me going into this world of retail business and operations and merchandising and all that kind of stuff. And when I was 22, I left Calgary to come to Toronto for the first time. I'd never been here before. I literally got off the plane. It was my first time in the city. And I didn't know anybody. And I managed to know someone kind of casually that I lived with for the first month that I was here. But I was working for Eddie Bauer on Bloor Street, no longer exists. But the culture of that store was so different than what I was used to from back home that inevitably I was just trying to find it my way. And so within the kind of that first year of being in the city, I was recruited by Banana Republic on Bloor. And that was a really great step, because really by 2001, so I was 23, I kind of got into an actual management role, which was great. And then being able to kind of go from there into various levels of management until I got my own store when I was like 26 or 27, and got to do a lot of really cool leadership experiences with them and go to different conferences and stuff in the States. And I don't know, all of it was really all good and great. But at the end of the day, what was really driving me in those positions and those roles was the business side of it. It was all about numbers. But, it wasn't really until 2009 that I actually got to start with HMV. They kind of randomly called me in 2009 and said, okay, there's an opportunity at the Superstore. Would you consider, this role? And so I remember meeting with them, and even when my whole interview was kind of not really constructed about music at all, they saw me as the value of this whole outside of apparel business, and taking the strategies that the apparel businesses have out there, bringing those into a music store. So, and maybe that's kind of where, the unlock is in terms of pop music and how we're a little bit different than everybody else, because we are operating maybe from a different way of doing things. But with HMV though, I was a threat. I mean, I came in, the kids saw me as this outsider. I never really fit in to the culture of HMV when I first got there. And a lot of the tenured staff really kind of had their back up against me, because they were like, no, this guy's, he's not one of us. Right. And so I had to fight and build my own credibility beyond pop stars and learn, and learn. And it was the perfect playground to be in, because there was so much space to really not have the weight of the business on me specifically. And my boss, Steve Hoy, who's an HMV legend, I was so fortunate to be under him for the first year and a bit, until I actually got the store on my own, because he was so supportive and let me kind of figure it out for myself. There wasn't this expectation that I was going to come in and change culture. Mm-hmm. That's what their hope was. But I didn't feel that pressure that there wasn't any metrics and things that I needed to hit per se, beyond some of the most obvious KPIs that most retailers focus on. So my challenge there really was more about getting buy-in from the staff and trying to get them to understand what I was trying to achieve in terms of the customer experience, and trying to take some of the knowledge that I had about how to run departments and how to run merchandising and drive sell through and things. That all kind of started happening organically, which was great. But a lot of it with HMV was I was an outsider, but I was kind of, I forget that I was, to be honest with you, because I hold that whole experience to my heart very, very closely. But I forget how maybe crazy I might have come across when I was first onboarded. So I was always having to try to improve myself. I felt like I was always had my kind of back against the wall because I wasn't one of them. I didn't have this long history of being in music. I wasn't a musician. I didn't, I didn't have a record collection. I didn't have any of those things. I was just, a kid, really. Not really a kid, but I was naive, but I think that naiveness kind of allowed me to be more open-minded, because I think that had I known the resistance that I was really up against, I probably would have been more defeated. Right. But I didn't know any better. I just pushed, like, this is my agenda. This is what I'm doing. Building buy-in along the way, and I found my way. And despite my ambitions to work in a record store my whole life, I hadn't yet at that point. And so it was just a really exciting time.
You mentioned that, going into HMV, and this is just my reflection on it. So you're now working in a space that you've sort of wanted to work in as a child, or younger. And you have this interest in the charts and the sales and the business side of things, and you have the interest in the music, and then you say you go into this space and you think, okay, I'm here, and you come up against all of this resistance. I heard you say, I kept on pushing my agenda. How, dive into that a little deeper with me, please, because I can imagine, going for you're pushing this rock up a hill, and there's people that are, either stopping you or coming up against you. How did you keep going, and what was the thing that actually made you find that stride where you're like, okay, I got it, now we're in this together and we're making it happen?
Well, I think with anyone who goes into a new environment, it's about finding your allies. I mean, that's the strategy for anybody. I think in any business environment is to find who can you trust, who can you align with. And so with HMV, I think people knew that I was never an asshole. Like, I was never a jerk. I was always me, who I am now, and excitable and passionate and blah blah blah. Everyone's like, "Oh, Derek's so passionate," and it's just like, but that's just life. I mean, this is what we're doing. And so I think people understood that I had good intentions, and I just think that maybe some of my missteps in that first year were just about coming across as a little too corporate, too Gap Inc., because obviously that's one of the brands I worked for, and I just kind of, because that's what the culture was of those big companies, was so, right. Well, what do you mean you don't understand? What do you mean you're not part of this? This is what we're doing, and so that first year really was about, like I said, just kind of building a bit of an alliance with some of the leaders in the store, and even like the management team and trying to, and the supervisors who ran different departments, and trying to figure out what motivates them and what are they looking to get out of this whole experience. And I think that is really the greatness about a space that large, is that you can have these little microisms of talent that are kind of pushing the ball kind of with you, but in a much more, smaller way. But they're encouraged and they're inspired and they want to do it. So it was just about that, and just trying to get some of the buy-in was also about brand survival. I think that a lot of the times I was like, we're in a world where people don't have to pay for music, and we're in an environment. This was before Netflix, of course, but like, we're in an environment where people don't need to. They can download movies, they can pirate movies off the internet. Like, they don't need to come into our space. It's our responsibility to make them want to come back. And you own that as an associate in the store. The effort that you put into the engagement or to the interaction is on you. I can't control what you're going to say to a customer. Obviously, going back to my Gap Inc. years, for sure there was lots of training programs that we did to talk about the customer experience, but so much of the customer experience is organic, and it's not about following a script or following steps. It's really about connecting with people. And I think what was great about that space was we had so many different diverse personalities that in some ways customers would come in specifically looking for certain associates, and that was brilliant, because that's what made the Superstore super, was that we had all this talent within this building. So
It's amazing. Oh my gosh, there's so many places that I want to go with that. One of the things that I loved that you said was, it's not about following a script, it's about creating that, just to paraphrase, is having that connection, making that organic conversation sort of come up to connect. How has that really, well, I know from my experience of you and pop music and Christy and everyone involved in the store, that you guys are doing that so well. But how do you do that? How are you doing it? And how is that also, what I'm really curious about is, how is that playing out into the other areas of your life?
I just think, I always just, my whole mantra for pop was, make your own music, start your own dance, and which is a Madonna line, of course.
Yes, I was just going to say, spotlight.
But it's true though, it really is. And so, and there's another little quote that I've been using lately, because a lot of my friends right now in life are just at crossroads because of their careers not being where they're supposed to be, or because their companies are closing down or downsizing because of COVID. And my big thing to all of them is like, take your passion, make it happen, which is like I think that's Flashdance, I'm pretty sure. But it's true. I swear to God. These things are cheesy, but that's what life is. And I know that people don't always have the answers. And I know that I've been very fortunate because, again, I'm a white, male, passable, straight male, potentially. And so I've had doors open for me that maybe wouldn't have opened for somebody who's a person of color, or someone who is transgender, or, numerous other things that could have been not in my favor, that I've had in my favor. And so I just think that going back to the store is about, and what the environment that we've created is just about authenticity and being present. And I'm not there. I never set up pop music to make $1 million. I was never, my motivation was never about, let's become the next Virgin Records. You know what I mean? It was never my thing. And I just wanted to have fun. And I think actually, when HMV shut down in April 2017, much of my decision to do pop came down to the fact that I didn't want to go back to work. I just didn't want to subscribe to those environments anymore. That I couldn't, I had the greatest experience with HMV how do I go and sell or manage any other business? And so I've been so fortunate that this has worked out. But I only signed it originally a 2-year lease. I wasn't sure if this business plan was going to work. I didn't know if people were going to show up or not. I didn't know how many records we were going to sell. I didn't know how many records we needed to carry. I didn't know any of those things. I just kind of figured it out as we went along. And so, and then we've kind of created this tribe following that through mostly Instagram, I would say, that has just continued to support the dream. And it's challenged me this year in such a way because we went online in a way that we hadn't been online before. And it's created a whole new audience that I didn't have to deal with before. And so, and now it's just a juggling act, and it's fun. But I think I might have said that, I also kind of miss, not I don't really miss, but there's a simplicity that existed when we first opened that no longer exists now. And right. So this year has been such a level up, and I'm grateful to have Christy, who's at the store right now, and she's juggling 5 million things today. I know that she is, but that's just our world, and that's exciting. And again, this could have been a very different situation this year. We could have been closed by now if I didn't already have an existing website that we were able to pivot to so quickly, back in the spring. And so, I don't know. To me, everything that is pop is just very authentic, and that's what it is. It's nothing more than that. It's honest curiosity about new releases. It's honest curiosity about classic albums. I've learned so much because with HMV I was never really on the floor all that much, to be honest. I mean, with HMV my role was more GM, so I was more kind of like circling kind of areas, but I was never really kind of in the field as much. So I think that if anything, the pop is really, I've learned so much more, even about music, just because of I'm forced to, in a way, because I'm on this path of discovery with my customers. They're discovering things, I'm discovering things, and there's obviously new albums that come out every week. So, what are they about? I don't know. Let's listen to it. Let's find out. Like, I'm not pretending that I know all the answers.
Right.
And I just kind of go with it. And sometimes I'll also have to fake it. I'm not gonna lie. So there's times you just gotta go, like, yeah, that's what it's about. Or you're reading a hype sticker as if it's like the most important knowledge of a record, but that's what hype stickers are for. So you can't know everything. You can't love everything. I certainly don't.
Right.
Right now there's been a lot of really cool like indie, like Phoebe Bridgers, and they're like artists that are selling 1 million records this year. Not kidding, 1 million, because they're indie artists, but artists that I just can't get into. And I'm like, I can appreciate that they're selling really well, but I'm just not there.
Yeah.
And then there's other artists that I get really into that I try to like do my best to kind of push and promote. And so again, but that's the challenge of it all. That's the nature of the business, is that you everyone's got their own idea of what they like. And so what's been great about our following is that they're really open to suggestion, and for the most part they're willing to try to listen to us when it comes to whatever we're posting on Instagram or whatever seems to be of the moment. So
yeah, I love that. It's funny, and what you say about trying to get into, or knowing that there's popular artists and not being able to get into it, but then having these other ones that you want to push. I'm very similar. A friend of mine, so she and I run a yoga retreat in Italy every year. Have been since 2017.
Right.
And 2019 we were in Italy, we're driving, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna be DJ. So she puts on Sufjan Stevens.
Okay.
And I'm listening to, I'm like, I just cannot for the life of me get into this. And we're driving through Tuscany, and I'm like, this is beautiful, but it's not working for me.
Right.
And then actually it was last month before Record Store Day, she sent it to me. She's like, here's his new album, you have to listen. And I don't know what it was, but I listened to it and it clicked, and I'm like, okay, this is the new record that I'm going to get. Because, I come into your shop and I have a theme.
Of course. Yeah.
But because I'm so, and my friends laugh at me all the time. So they're not my friends anymore. No, I'm kidding. But they laugh at me because like my collection is all like stuff from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Like I'm like boom radio station. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so I made it a point to every Record Store Day, I have to have at least one record that is current.
Right.
That's like in the year that I'm currently in. It's got to be like 2020 or at least in the last like 4 or 5 months.
Right.
And so I have to, go out and find other people to do that for me. But
did you listen? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, so I listened to the album before, and then I bought it because I love it so much. And now I'm addicted. I don't know if you can see, it's right there. The Sufjan Stevens album.
I can't. Oh, yes.
It's
vaguely.
right there.
Micro, yes. Right.
Okay. Have you listened to it? Have you opened it up? Let's talk about the music experience for a moment and why I'm so in love with vinyl. I've wanted to get a record player for the longest time.
Right.
I had a couple records that I bought like back in, like when Madonna released American Life, I have like American Life on vinyl, like the 12-inch. Cool. And then I picked up a bunch of other ones like used stuff.
Yeah.
And then, over a decade passes, and the whole time I'm like, I want a record player. But I was traveling a lot, so I never had a place.
It didn't make sense, right?
Yeah. So anyways, long story, I finally get the record player now. And what I love, for me, music is a journey. It's an experience, right? So I buy my record, and then I clean it, I put it down, I play it. I already know the album. Like, me, I'm buying stuff that I already know. I just want to have the physical form of it. But I love to like read the Wikipedia page and find out about the sales, and then I go watch the music videos. Like I make a big deal about it. And what I love about this particular record is that inside he has a book of colored it's
artwork, isn't it?
It's artwork, yes. If you ask me, it kind of looks like, those meditation coloring books for adults. But I think
maybe that's his next adventure.
I think it's a little bit more serious than that. But I love it because, I'm all about the energy. So I'm listening to the music, and that's making me feel a certain way. But then I'm looking at these images that he's created, and that's making me feel another way. And then I'm just like, my mind is blown just
Right.
from the whole, and it takes you on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, music was always an escape as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if I didn't feel understood by my family or my friends, I went into
Mm-hmm.
my bedroom and I played Madonna, and I'm like, deeper and deeper, this chick gets me. Do you know what I
Right.
mean?
Of course.
Or I'll never forget Jan Arden. Okay, so this is how eclectic, I guess, I am. Like I went from like listening to all of these like Euro house, Euro dance, but then I made my father buy me Jan Arden, Living Under June, when I was in grade 8.
Right.
And that I'll never forget. That record like touched me. That I would listen to Good Mother when I was in grade 8. How old
Yeah.
am I? Like 13 maybe?
Mm-hmm.
Bawling my eyes out because I could feel that song. Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Well, it's one of our pandemic records. I mean, I did a recap of the best-selling albums of the year so far, and Jen Arden actually, we sold a lot of Living Under June, specifically in the springtime. It was one of those weird albums that we were selling like 2 or 3 a week of, and so she was definitely what I call comfort listening, which we'll get into in a bit. But she was definitely one of those titles that resonated with fans, and I think it's. The singer songwriter, the pop, I wouldn't say pop diva, but that kind of honesty that comes out in those songs. Sarah McLachlan would be another example.
Oh, love.
There's that resonates, I think, specifically with gay men more so than straight men, because it's a perspective, it's a storytelling that comes across as genuine, and I don't know. But then again, I shouldn't kind of peg it to that, but I definitely think there's Amanda Marshall would be another album that.
Oh my God! You are just naming all all of my '90s like Lilith Fairgrounds.
But look at Alanis Morissette this year. I mean, if you look at the thing I published yesterday, Alanis Morissette's #1 album of the year for me in terms of sales. That isn't because of the local market; it's because of the international market. But then of the local market, though, the demos from 1994, 1998 that got released for Record Store Day like 4 years ago, which somehow I got stock on, is my #1 selling catalog album of the year. Wow. And that has nothing to do with me telling people, oh, it's amazing, it's this, it's that. There's just a natural energy that comes from that era of Alanis that resonates, and so people want to consistently relive that. And even Drink a Little Pill, I think it made my top 10 as well for catalog albums of the year. So
wow.
Yeah, no, there is and that's the great thing about being called pop music, is that there's no shame in any of this. Like, I love the fact that we can celebrate anybody, and on that same list was Tom Petty, on that same list was Leonard Cohen. I mean, there is, like, again, we are called pop music, but I love the fact that we can be everybody. Nina Simone this year, we've sold 60 Nina Simone records this year. 60. That is a lot of,
wow.
and there's nothing new. It's all just people who are discovering Nina Simone. So it's like, yes, this is what it's about. Because those, I think sometimes also as a listener, you can't hear things until you're ready. And so Nina Simone in particular is not very accessible. Like, she doesn't have the most warmest, loving voice. It's very harsh. It's very real. It's very, very sad. And I just think that her music, especially this era that we're in right now, it just speaks to people. And so it's really cool to see that kind of trend. You're like, wow, Nina Simone is like outselling anyone else this year, like in terms of like new artists. Like, no one else has moved 6 records of their catalog that we pulled up. So I mean, again, on a national level, different story, but in terms of my little micro business, it is cool to pull these stats out, because that's the fun part. That's the part of me that's the analytics and the number crunching and the bestsellers and that kind of stuff. So
okay, when it comes to music, that's never the first place that I would go to in terms of like these numbers and stuff, but hearing them as a music fan is interesting to me, because all my life I've always believed that, I have a weird taste in music and it doesn't, resonate with the people around. But to hear something like, I'm not very well versed with Nina Simone's catalog. I know, the hits like Feeling Good, etc.
Of course.
But to know that there is like a wave of people now that are getting into it, that would, like, it would nudge me in that direction. Or also, like, knowing that other people are interested in similar
Jen Arden.
Jan Arden, like, and I just discovered recently that she released a bunch of stuff, like her old stuff, on vinyl. So Living Under June is on my list.
Yes. Yeah, it's Hits and Other Gems. It's like a repackaged hits package. It's a repackaged hits package. But anyway, but it's got new songs from her new television show, and so it's a bit of a marketing gimmick, to be honest. But it's, fans will buy what they want. So
yeah. No, it's amazing, and it always comes back to, and it's funny because I've been saying this in many different ways, how I see COVID as a blessing. For me, I think it's really like knocked me on the path that I'm supposed to be on, that I resisted for a while. But one of the big things that it did for me was bring back that experience of music, right? So I stopped really buying music. Actually, a friend of mine and Andrew and I would go to HMV 333 Yonge Street every Tuesday, because I would work, and then we would walk to his place, and then we would walk down, and we would hit up the third floor. We would check out what's going on the ground floor. That was like our time. Right. And we would buy CDs, and then I would go home and listen to them. But I started to notice, like, over the years, the little insert went from being a little book to just a foldable thing with some of the,
the 100%.
credits.
Agreed.
And then I stopped buying music. I would only buy music of artists that, I loved, and I wanted their whole collection, like Kylie, Madonna, etc.
Of course. Yeah.
And I just felt empty inside. I'm just going to say it. There was like something missing until I got my record player, and finally I could touch, and I could smell, and I could feel. And, I grew up in the 80s, but, we didn't have a record player. We had one or two records, but my parents were more about tapes and stuff like that, right? And then we went into cassette. So I never really had the experience of vinyl.
Right.
But there's something about the disc and the grooves and the needle, and how the needle and the grooves, when they meet, they make sound. And then you have like, you can't have this, like, okay, here's an example. I just bought Madam X a year after it was released, because I didn't want it on CD. I just wanted it on vinyl. I finally get it on vinyl. I've been listening to it digitally for a year. It's a completely different record when you feel it. And you have like that vibration that comes from it. Yeah. It's so fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, and that album is very, it was very polarizing, because, and not to discount Kylie Minogue, but she's releasing a disco record tomorrow. That's not that groundbreaking. Everyone knows what Kylie Minogue does. Yeah. That's what she does. Whereas Madonna, not, we can go on a whole tangent about this. She doesn't give a fuck, and she wants to do her own thing, and she's always going to do her own thing. Yeah. And that whole era was a great moment for her to kind of not care about the commerciality of what she's releasing, but rather the statement. And so I'm glad that it resonated with you, because I had to talk to a lot of fans last year and try to get them to see that part of it. And of course, they're looking for the disco singles, and I'm like, this isn't Confessions on a Dance Floor. Yeah. Although that album this year, it made our top 10 in terms of album sales of the year so far, in terms of like catalog. So
that's what I still have to get on vinyl. I'm slowly building my Madonna collection on vinyl. So,
but it's great though, because these are the dialogues that we have. I mean, and people come in all the time and they're looking for the specific, like the pop stars that they know. This year, a great example would be Jessie Ware. So not everyone knows who Jessie Ware is, and so we've sold like 30 plus copies of it this year. And we would have sold a lot more had it actually been in the stock, but it's been on back order for months at a time. And so, but it's one of those records where it's like, it's not the most obvious pop star, and it's not the most obvious pop single, but it just really resonates. And so that's where I feel pop music can we kind of have that perhaps that queer following, is because we do celebrate these artists that aren't necessarily radio pop stars. Like, they're not Ariana Grande, they're not who else would be kind of a pop star? Alessica. I mean, it's funny. I don't actually follow pop music all that much, but it's just one of those things where Bright Light out of New York. So he's amazing. And again, just one of those artists. I'm like, I'm pushing these releases that people wouldn't necessarily, get. Sunuka would be another example out of England this year. Again, a record that probably wouldn't get any attention anywhere else. But we've got an environment that can showed off. So
I
yeah.
love
Anyway,
that.
but it's but again, it's also it's getting people and fans to open up their ears to other things that they're not just they're not used to. Maybe in a way that the stuff in Stevens is kind of your example this year. Although truthfully, I don't really get them either. But people really wanted the Call Me by Your Name soundtrack, and then I'm like, okay, so maybe this guy's a big deal. I remember when Carrie Lowell came out at the HMV, and it sold some numbers and it trended for a bit. But the new album, Video Games is such a great track, and I love that single.
Love that
and
song.
so yeah, so I with records, and again, this is where I'm challenged and pushed as the owner, is to open my own ears and try to kind of understand why a record is trending or sounding the way that it is, and also to try to get ahead of things. Like, so last year, one of our successes was Duran Jones and Indications, and so we have a lot of people who love Leon Bridges, and Leon Bridges is very, in my opinion, pretty mainstream. Like, everyone kind of knows who Leon Bridges is ish, but there's really only released 2 records, and it's been a while since Louis released an album. So there's another artist that came out, and this is what Christy does a lot of too, is we just kind of play off what you already love, and okay, well then listen to this. And so and it just, to me, it's just really validating when I see the sales numbers, because it's like people actually, not only do they listen, but they actually bought. And so that's always the challenge that we have. And she's always, it's been cool to work with someone who gets it the way that I get it. And it's no coincidences that she's part of the brand. There's no coincidences. I just feel like she adds such value and pushes me in a way that I sometimes don't want to be pushed. And but it's because it's all for the customer experience. It's all about making it memorable and valuable. So.
Did you know Christy like from HMV days, or is she a friend from before, or did you hire her
Nope.
for pop? Like, how did she come into
This is my favorite story about this is she really emailed me a letter. She emailed me randomly last November and was like, I can sling records for you like nobody else. And I'm like, I need to sell her. At the end of the day, this is a business. Like, it's fun and cool to be pretty and fun and like be a store that's whatever it is, but you got to sell records. And so, so for anyone who comes across and says, I can pitch records, I can sling records, as she used to say. I'm like, okay, well, I'm interested. Let's see what you got. And I couldn't believe it, just in terms of the actual impact that she's had in terms of the business. Because I can sell records, of course, but to trust somebody else to come in when I'm not there, to have that same energy and that same commitment to making sure that people leave with something, because again, it is about a business, and leave with something, not necessarily like a product, but like to leave with an experience that is not just, I went into the store, nobody talked to me. Like, they went into the store that they were engaged in some way. Something was memorable about their time in the space, and so she's been such a help. I mean, again, she's learned a lot this year too, because we've both kind of had to adapt to this new online world, and it's insane the amount of people who place orders with us. And I'm not complaining, because this is not a bad problem to have, but I'm just blown away by so many things that have happened this year that I cannot explain. That are cosmic, that are I don't know. I to say #blessed is so tacky, but it really is. Like, you mentioned something earlier. I can't remember if it was recorded or not, but the vibrations. So much about my journey with pop music 3-4 summers ago, before we actually had a space or anything like that, was all about vibing high. And so and really putting things out there and letting putting that energy out there and having it come back to you and have to make a decision, and then everything else just kind of falls into play. And there's so many things that happened even in that first year of pop that were so cosmic, that Christy coming to me last year was just another one of those examples, and I think that part of my success, again, is just being able to make decisions and my motivation to be just a good space, and again, not to think of it too much as a on the money side of it, which in the end I ultimately have to, of course, because it's a business. But my intentions are always just about, can we pull this off? Can we call it pop music? Like, let's be ridiculous. Let's call it pop music, because everybody shits on pop music. So like, what can I do? And that's why I said I only sounded 2 release initially. Like, I don't know if this is gonna work, and we don't sell vintage records, which the entire industry of vinyl record stores is reliant upon vintage records. Like, you cannot have a record store without vintage records, because you need that margin to exist, because you don't make any money. Okay, I shouldn't say that, you don't make any money, but you don't make a lot of money on new records. You really don't. And so it's all about volume. And so So with Pop, not to get into any numbers and business things, but it was just like, again, my initial game plan, I swear to God, was like, how many records do I need to sell a day, to make this work? And that's kind of where it all started. It was like, I need to sell 10 records a day. If I make $10 a record, that's generally what we make, is about $10 a record. How many of these records do I need to sell a day? And then how many do I need to sell a month? And do I pay myself? How much is rent going to be? And that's kind of all this stuff formulaic, how it all happened. It wasn't this like, the business plan eventually came to fruition. It was much more detailed, but when I first started doing this, it was just kind of like, again, I call it cosmic, because I was all of a sudden, I would unlock these learnings. I would be like, okay, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can pull this off. Maybe this could happen. And so, and just thinking in that way alone was sending vibrations, as I would call it, to the world, saying, I'm ready, that we're going to do this. And so, we built in apparel into the mix. And so, that was a big part of the business too. But it's, I don't know, we're incredibly lucky, to have this environment we get to go to every day. And, again, I just go back to the fact that it really, is about the fans, and it's that's what keeps it interesting. That's what keeps us motivated and challenged. Is, we get a lot of random requests now than we ever did before, because we're just that much reachable. And as much as I want to be because they do take time, that is the core of the business. That is the core where we started. How we got to where we are now is because we made those things important when we had the time. And now that we don't have as much time, it's still about making those things important, but doing it in a way that's a little more efficient.
Right. I love how you said, about vibing high. And one of the things that comes to mind, and this came up in episode number 11 with Heather. She's a chiropractor, female business owner, just opened up a chiropractic office like in the middle of the pandemic.
Yep.
And she talked about the same thing, about this idea of alignment, like aligning her. She had to align herself in a certain way to then start to attract other therapists into her space. So what have you done both personally and professionally to align yourself to draw in the people that you're drawing in with the fans, with the associates? What have you done in your life?
I think I've been living my truth, which I know sounds really a really weird thing to say, but I haven't faked anything. I haven't faked a single thing about the brand, aside from reading the occasional hype sticker. But I don't know. I really think that the moment I decided to do it was telling the universe that we're going to make it happen, and then from there on in, it was just a series of things that just kind of lined up in our favor, that the right moment, the right time, and the rest is history, I suppose. And personally, I think that I continue to make myself as successful as I can with the business. I still try to be there, 4 days a week, sometimes 3, sometimes less, depends on what's going on in my world. But I think that the challenge I think that I have is just wanting to do it all, and the great thing about those first 2 years was that I was able to do it all. I had that kind of control, and so my learning this year personally has been to not be as to let go of things, to just trust people to live up to the brand values that you've established, and don't say things, don't nitpick, don't react when it's not necessary. So I've had to bite my tongue a few times, a lot actually this year. I'd say I've attempted to send a message to somebody, Christy or someone else in the space, and I'm like, you know what? No, this does not create positive energy. This is not a positive thing. Nothing will really come of this other than they're going to get this message. They're going to feel shitty about themselves, or shitty about something they did. And so, whereas my life before with HMB and things were all about accountability. So it was all about telling people exactly how it was, and you didn't do this, and what's the action plan to not do it again, and all those kinds of formulaic responses that you're kind of programmed to do in our business, in our industry. So I just think that in terms of myself personally, this year I've tried to not be as so serious and to not be so cheap. I think that's another thing too. And but again, it was that cheapness that got us to where we are. We couldn't
Right.
we couldn't have existed if I were to pay myself very well, or pay or comp things or do discounts. Like we never do discounts. Like, and I don't mean that in a boastful way, but it's like we just don't operate on that. We've never felt comfortable operating on that platform, because our pricing is very competitive as it is, and so I would rather just, I don't know. There's just little things in life that I'm learning to, like, this year. I'm just learning to kind of not be so, hung up on, and including even just trusting that everything will work out. Like with COVID, I mean, we pivoted so quickly to our old online store, which our old online store was decent, but it was not where we are now, and it wasn't getting the attention that it's getting now. And so, but again, it was just one of those things where I'm like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Like, I don't know, you kind of just gotta you gotta move quickly. You can't moan and groan about kind of what life is thrown at you, and you have to kind of just move with it and just trust that people will understand what it is you're trying to do. And
right.
So, and I think in the industry, I think I've made waves. I think that I don't think a lot of people give me a lot of credit for doing the business the way we have, and to not do vintage, and to not, and again, going back to calling ourselves pop music. I think that we probably weren't expected to last. I don't think people really probably banked on us 3 years ago and thinking, okay, well, that's not going to work, because it really hadn't been done before. And because again, so much of record stores is built into the margins that you make off used records.
Right.
And but yeah, but it has. And I opened those doors 3 years ago, trusting that it was going to work. And I guess that continues to be my attitude. That continues to be my if anything, I just want more recognition and more. I want more status, not personally, but as a brand. Like, I want to be
right.
more. Like, I feel like I'm always fighting with vendors to get products, and I'm always fighting with the powers that be to kind of give us the spotlight that I think we deserve. And but you can't live your life with that motivation. You can't be motivated by I shouldn't say fame or profile. You have to. You're motivated by the people who you're with every day, and so.
Right.
But we all have egos. We all have egos that we have to manage, right? So it's at what point do you not take something personally, and what point do you just realize it's just, okay, this is just business. This is just you want that special attention, but you're not going to get it. So don't moan about you're not going to get it. Just carry on, and just know that you're a small little fracture of the market, tiny, and but we're growing, and we're getting bigger, and we're getting more attention, and so all that's very exciting for me. But I also, in my head, I'm very competitive, and so I have to, like, I don't follow other record stores on social media. Like, I only follow Dead Dog Records, only because Steven and I have a bit of a kinship, because I just feel like he's an older gentleman. In this industry, has changed so much in the last 5 years. But the Sonic Booms of the world, the Rotate This is, I don't follow any of them, because at the end of the day, whatever they're doing is not what I'm doing. And so, and I just find that the more that I immerse myself in their world, the more of my own world I lose. So that to me has kind of been another challenge this year, is to really kind of tune them out, because it's so easy to get your back up, and it's so easy to be discouraged by what some of these monsters are doing. And monsters not in terms of bad people, but in terms of how long they've been around for, how big a business they have, what kind of following they've got, 10,000, 11,000 followers, like so much more than I've ever got. But I can't spend energy thinking about those things, because then I lose who I am. So I just have to trust that organically my follower count will get there, and I'll that matters to me. But I mean, there is a little bit of ego. Of course, we're all guilty of that. I mean, we're all guilty of wanting to be the best, and I'm really proud of kind of, again, what we've achieved in 3 years, and I do take stock in that, but I don't sit and dwell upon it and let it get to me, because there's always challenges. Like right now, I've got 5 things spinning at the store right now, even though I'm not there, that I'm worried about, that I'm like, oh, I'm not there to catch them if they fall, and it's just you kind of let that go, and you just kind of just go with it. So
If I could just offer something to you, just from my own experience, not obviously in records, but
Right.
just in what I've noticed in general, the second I accepted the fact that I wasn't going to get the recognition that I was looking for inside from this particular source,
Yeah.
and I started to cultivate that within myself, that sort of disappeared, but then came to me, if that makes sense. And if I could just tell you, because the reason why I asked you on this podcast is because when I look at you from like my, Stevie Nicks hippie life, I look at you and I see you as somebody who I say is living spirit fully, full of the spirit, which is the essence of who we are. And I see that, you've got the drive, you've got the passion, and there's just a divine natural intelligence that is coursing through you and also surrounding you, that is making pop music, it's supporting its blossom.
Right.
And so I think you would love, people in the industry to notice it, but I think what's really important, and this was one thing too, coming from, I was presenting at fitness conferences and yoga conferences for years, and I always wanted the higher ups to recognize me, but it was more like the students coming up to me and being like, this is how this experience changed my life. Exactly. And that's what, like, okay, this is why I'm here. So I don't need that. It would be nice, and also this is good. So
well, that's what correlates with me. It's like, I can't spend energy worrying about what Sonic Boom is doing, or what Rotate This is doing, or what Cops Records is doing here in the Toronto market, because they've been around doing it for 20 plus years, some of them longer, some of them 40 years. Yeah. But I know that we're just beginning, and I know how exciting and what I've got to offer the world down the road is going to be so incredible. But it's all in time, and you can't burn yourself out, and you can't live beyond who you are, just for the sake of ego, just for the sake of wanting to be seen, you know what I mean? And but I think that going back to the kind of some of the insecurities I had about the brand was, a lot of it came down to, I think, just because I wasn't the straight male white dude listening to, classic rock or to indie alternative. Like, because I wasn't that guy, I often thought, like, look at me diving into this business model that I'm going to be seen as this expert or whatever in, and, but I couldn't think about those things, because if I did, I would never have taken the leap. I wouldn't have ever jumped off the edge to get to where we are now. And so, everything else is just kind of aligned, and I said to go back to the fan experience. So that to me really is what I seek most value now in is just the fan experience, and knowing that people I've somehow made their lives better because of music, because they've always wanted to have a turntable, they never had one before. Now they have one, or they had one that was awful, and they have a better one now. So they're just little things that kind of add light into people's lives, and that's what it'll always be about, as much as I can control it. I mean, before we have our own mega store, I really, I want to keep pop as authentic as possible, as long as I can, and I have to just trust that will happen. I don't have a crystal ball that will tell me a year from now where we'll be, or what our store will look like, or what our following will look like. I just have to continue to live every day, and take it, 1 week at a time, and set priorities, and try to not drop any balls.
Yeah. So I love that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this conversation, because I like I said, I love your store. I love everything that you've brought into my life just by your physical space existing.
Right.
And so through that, I love you for that. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the support and giving me this platform to speak. I mean, again, I think it's happening a bit more than it was when I first started, but I think some of that is the recognition of the fact that we are doing something that is making the world a better place. If that sounds so cheesy to say.
That's exactly it. You have made my world a better place, and that in turn has helped me make other people's worlds a better place. So
exactly. I just think we're all looking to be inspired, and that's what I think the wintertime looks very daunting right now. What's going on in the world, and I mean, and obviously the U.S. There's a lot of things in the world right now, but it's like, but I mean, at the end of the day, you can only control what you can control. You can't control tomorrow. You can't control the next day after that. You have to just stay present and do your best to not overreact.
Mm-hmm.
So
I have a final question that I want to ask. It's, what is your heart telling you right now about what you're doing and where you're going?
we've only just begun. So
I love it.
No, we have. We've only just. I cannot wait to show the world what we'll do next. I really, I've been so encouraged this year by the world, not even just the Toronto market, not even just the Toronto vinyl market, but like there's been fans that have reached out to me from around the world that are just somehow could not find a brand that spoke to them in a way that I guess we do, and I just it's really inspiring. It is, and I just have to absorb that as much as I can without getting off task. So
All right. I love that. Well, I'll tell you what, we will follow up in a year. Well, obviously, I'm going to see you. We're going to be in touch for the next little while. But I mean, in a year from now, I want to sit down and have a follow up with you and just see how things have continued to blossom for you. Because honestly, brother, when I'm saying this, I mean it from the entirety of my heart. You are on the right path. You are doing what you're meant to be doing. And what you just said about your heart, saying we've only just begun, it made my heart flutter. So that tells me that you're aligned with the natural intelligence that is here to make this world a better place. So
well, I appreciate that feedback. I again, one day at a time. That's all you can do.
Yeah, you're amazing.
So,
Derek
cool.
Antonio, thank you. So I'm going to include your links and stuff in the show notes. Tell people where they got to come to experience the
world of pop. Pop goes to the world. Well, our retail stores at Broadview and Gerrard East here in Toronto, which is 581 Gerrard East. Easily accessible by 504, 505, or 506 streetcar. But there's also this little thing called pop-music.ca, and that is what really is the future for us. I think that as we continue to get bigger, trying to make that as best it can be. And so for now, that is really where to find us. So
amazing. I love you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on your show.
And that's a wrap. Lovers, thank you so much for joining me for this journey of Heart to Heart, Season 1. I do hope that you'll join me for the live episode. And if you can't, and there's a question that you want to know about me, please send it to me at paulgaloro.com. You'll see the email in the show's notes. Or you can always pop into the Facebook group, send me a message there, and I'll be more than happy to answer it. So remember, Wednesday, December 16th at 8 p.m., we will have this final live Heart to Heart of 2020. Thank you so much. I love you tremendously, and I'll see you soon.